I'll be very honest in this video. I sometimes feel that I'm very racist towards my own race. I want to talk about something really important. Every time I open the news or scroll through social media, I feel this immense frustration. Somewhere in the world, somewhere abroad, an Indian student is caught in a scam or caught littering around. In another country, people are protesting against immigration, and kind of Indians are being singled out. On TikTok or Instagram, randomly a video goes viral of Indians littering or spitting or shoplifting. And you know what happens? Basically, the whole community pays the price. One person's mistake actually becomes the reputation of all of us. And that's what really hurts. Now, I know some of you might already be feeling offended hearing that line, but hear me out. When I say that, what I really mean is that I'm not blind to the flaws in our community. I see them, I call them out, and I believe that until we accept them, we cannot fix them. Now, I obviously know that I will get a lot of backlash for this video. I always do, honestly. Every time I make a video from my own experience of living in Australia, my journey, my struggles, my PR story, my part-time work story, my student loan journey, my lessons, there are always people ready to criticize. They would say things like, "Who are you to speak? That's not how it is for everyone." And I agree, that's exactly my point. This is my experience. Your experience could be totally different and good for you. I tried to cover the actual reality, the actual truth on my channel, and I will always do that. But at the same time, I'm so grateful for the love that I receive. So many of you actually call me Didi, you trust me, you want my guidance, you want my opinions, and I love doing that. I feel that has now become the purpose of my life, to help you young students, young migrants settle in Australia. So let me make one thing very clear before we actually get into this video. I am not convincing anyone to come to Australia. Let's just get this straight. In fact, I literally say this out loud, bluntly. If you don't have what it takes, don't even come to Australia. Don't even go abroad. Why would I want you to come here and mess this country up just the way we already messed up our own? And you have to understand, I don't own an immigration consultancy. I don't get paid by any universities to push admissions. The only thing I like doing is making these raw videos, speaking to you one-on-one through my one-on-one calls, where I kind of give honest ground reality advice. Sometimes I even, tell the on-ground reality, and people decide that they don't even want to come to Australia. And I feel proud of that, because I kind of gave them clarity and saved them from spending those thousands of dollars, basically. Let's set this straight. I am not here to glamorize study abroad. If anything, I'm here to de-glamorize it. Because honestly, moving abroad is not easy. You don't just come here to get a degree and get a dream life. You actually have to break yourself down completely and rebuild yourself from scratch, brick by brick, cell by cell. You can't be the same version of yourself that came here. You have to change yourself. In this video, I will basically break down what just happened with the anti-immigration protests in Australia, why Indians are actually being criticized all across the world, and I'm sure you would have seen Deshbhakt's videos. If not, please go and check them out. Which of these criticisms are actually true, and which of them are just stereotypes that are built because of our own habits. And later on, I will discuss with you my blunt take on how we behave abroad, and finally, what we can actually do to kind of fix our reputation. Cool, so let's start with the protests that happened here in Australia on the 31st of August. Something big actually happened in Australia. Across every major city, thousands of people came together under the banner of March for Australia to protest against immigration. This was by far one of the biggest anti-immigration movements in years, and it kind of shocked many Australians, especially the Indian community, obviously. Now, so on Sunday 31st, rallies were held in all the capital cities and almost around 20 towns. In total, it's known that approximately 50,000 people joined nationwide. In Sydney alone, there were 5,000 to 8,000 people who were actually seen waving flags and chanting slogans like "Save the Nation," "Stop the Invasion," and Melbourne also saw huge crowds, but things actually turned pretty violent in Melbourne. Police had to use pepper spray and sponge rounds to control clashes between protesters and counter-protesters. So there were counter-protesters as well. And there were other cities like Perth, Adelaide, Brisbane and Canberra. that saw huge turnouts. The banners and the slogans actually told us everything. Protesters carried slogans that said things like white unity at every opportunity and third world people bring third world problems. So while organizers claimed that protests were about numbers, it was clear from the messaging that racism was at the heart of it. Now, the government immediately, condemned these protests, and ministers described them as hate rallies, which were kind of organized by neo-Nazis. And just to be clear, a neo-Nazi is basically someone who follows the Nazi-style racism in modern times. These people actually believe in white supremacy, that white people are superior to others. And they often use violence and hate speech against the minorities, which Indians are in Australia. So now in Melbourne, police actually made dozens of arrests also, and Sydney was a bit calmer, but the intent of protests was actually the same everywhere. Why did people come out in such large numbers? First of all, protesters actually blamed immigrant for almost every major problem in the country. They kind of said that, migrants are pushing up house prices and rents, they are overcrowding hospitals, schools and trains and roads. They're taking away jobs and lowering the wages, changing Australian culture forever, which is the most absurd thing I've heard. If we do a fact check, facts tell a totally different story. Yes, immigration has increased since COVID, but official government data shows that it still is 37% lower than the previous peaks, 37% lower. You might have heard that they're saying 5 planes of migrants are arriving every single day. And this is half truth. Yes, people are arriving, but immigration levels are not at their historical high. It's just presented in a scary way. The housing crisis is obviously real, but experts say that the main causes are decades of underbuilding, councils delaying approvals, and investors holding multiple empty properties. Migrants have actually become the easy scapegoat. There was another reason that these protests escalated. There was an earlier pro-refugee rallies, which was especially a massive pro-Palestinian march that happened in Sydney. So the far-right groups saw this opportunity, and by far right, I mean extremist political groups that, often push anti-immigrant and anti-minority ideas. They kind of used TikTok and Telegram to spread videos, to fire up people. And the playbook wasn't only Australian. The style of the protests borrowed heavily from the recent UK far-right movements and even the Trump era that is currently happening in the US. If we talk about who was behind it, who organized all of this, it wasn't just ordinary citizens. It was a mix of extremists and opportunists. Online activists like someone random called Beck Freedom and Hugo Lennon, both known for their white nationalist ideas, were involved. And as per news, neo-Nazis like the National Socialist Network, led by someone called Thomas, showed up in black uniforms and actually gave Nazi salutes. In Melbourne and Adelaide, they even attacked Indigenous activists. Indigenous are the people who actually own Australian lands. And then there were also politicians, Pauline Hanson and Bob Catter, and all of these actually attended the rallies and they spoke at the rallies, giving these events actually some political weight, which was absurd. But let's not forget, there were also counter-protesters. Counter-protesters showed up. Anti-racist groups like the Refugee Action Coalition marched with the chants like Nazi scum off our streets. They wanted this neo-Nazi movement to stop. And also there were Indian community leaders like Amar Singh from Turbans for Australia. They also, they had already warned that Indians were being directly targeted in the flyers that were being spread. And that's exactly what happened. Now see, even though the organizers claimed that this is all about immigrants, but the reality was different as per my research. Flyers that were being given to these people in the march, they actually specifically blamed Indians for coming in huge numbers since 2020. One flyer compared Indian arrivals in just 5 years to all Greek and Italian migrants over 100 years. And this is, completely misleading data because we don't even have exact numbers of the Greek and Italian migrants that came over 100 years ago. So this was kind of just, built to scare people, scare the Australians who, started thinking that Indians will take over Australia for some reason. And, at rallies, South Asians heard chants like "send them back" And this kind of breaks our morale. There were other groups that were attacked too. Middle Easterns and Muslim migrants also kind of, felt targeted. Now, indigenous Australians were also attacked directly. Neo-Nazis storming the Camp Sovereignty in Melbourne, and they injured 4 people as well. The government itself was accused of betraying Australians with pro-migration policies. The backlash against these protests were massive. Most Australians actually condemned them, and they were like, nearly half the population of Australia has migrant roots. So many saw these rallies as dragging Australia back to the racist white Australia days. And to be honest, let's not forget, Australia itself is a country fully built on migration. If you actually go and read history, who came here after indigenous Australians? Migrants. There were convicts, settlers, workers, people from all over the world. The food, the culture, the economy, all of it has actually been shaped by migration. So when people today say, keep Australia Australian, I always think, what does that even mean? Because Australia has always been multicultural at its core. That's what we studied when we gave our Australian citizenship test, Thousands of peaceful Australians actually joined these protests with signs saying migrants are welcome, racists are not. And the media also played a huge role. Outlets like ABC, SBS and The Guardian fact-checked migration numbers and exposed the extremist ties. They actually gave migrant community a voice. The Australian government also acted. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and state premiers totally denounced these marches, saying diversity is at the heart of Australia's identity. New laws banning Nazi symbols were enforced and reassurance was given to the migrants. Police also made dozens of arrests. They seized weapons and declared search zones. When India's government actually publicly asked for safety of our Indian nationals, Australia responded quickly, promising protection and reaffirming that migrants are valued. Now, for Indians, the impact was obviously personal. Many students and families actually felt unsafe for the very first time. I myself was being asked by friends and families if I'm okay or not. And parents back in India began asking, are my children safe in Australia? And Indians have often been seen as a model minority contributing to business, IT, healthcare, teaching. So being singled out like this actually felt like a betrayal. Leaders and student groups organized forums, shared safety advice and met police, for reassurances. Universities were actually also worried that protests might discourage enrollment, especially if Canada or the UK started looking safer, which they're not looking safe anyway. What did these protests teach us? They gave us a clear lesson that yes, housing and infrastructure are kind of under strain, but blaming immigrants is just too simplistic. Misinformation actually spreads really fast, like that 5 planes narrative that people are coming in 5 planes. What about people that are actually going back as well? There are so many people that go back. Australia's multicultural values are fragile and they must be protected, and solidarity in such times really matters. So seeing Australians from all walks of life counter-protest showed that hate has no place here. Now at the end, were the protests necessary? Let's be blunt. They solved nothing. They offered no real policy solutions, just pure anger. They kind of gave extremists a platform and they created fear and division in the society. And to be honest, it actually damaged Australia's reputation internationally. If people truly wanted to debate immigration or housing, there are democratic ways to do that. There are petitions, there are community consultations, there are parliamentary discussions. But instead, what we actually saw will be remembered as a reminder of how not to raise an issue, to be honest. I just feel that this March for Australia was a clear warning of how fear and misinformation can actually spiral into hate. But it also showed something really positive, I feel. That the majority of Australians, the government, the media and the ordinary people actually stood up to say, this is not who we are. So I think if you're a student watching this video who plans to come here or is already here, don't panic, I would say. Yes, you will see these headlines, you will see reels being shared, you will see people being beaten around, and it can feel scary, but that's what media tries to do, to be honest. I'm living here, I haven't seen anything at all, giving you on ground reality. Australia still values migrants and Indians remain an important part of this country's future. So I don't think there's anything to be scared about. To be honest, I really want to zoom out a bit because it's not just Australia. Why are Indians being criticized across the world? And there are a lot of reasons, I feel, and I really want to talk about them. Now, in Canada, for example, there were, hundreds of students were caught in a massive visa scam involving fake college admission letters. The truth is that many students were actually victims of corrupt agents, but the entire community was labeled as fraudulent or scammers. On top of that, racist rumors went viral, like stories of Indians defecating or peeing on Canadian beaches. Police confirmed it never happened, but the damage was already done. And in the UK, I heard that politicians said Indians were the largest group of visa overstayers, apparently. While this technically true in numbers, the actual percentage was very small, only about 4%. Still, the message spread that Indians abuse the system. Then I think we all have seen that video of that lady shoplifting in the US, fully damaging our reputation. And also in the US, we know that, Indians dominate the H-1B visa program. On one hand, it shows our talent, but on the other, it also created a backlash, right? Some far-right choices, and by far-right, I mean the extremist groups, as we've already talked about, and the anti-immigrant politics, they began calling Indians job stealers and invaders, and there are hundreds of other cases about Indians. There are, we go out and we don't behave properly, we think that we're still in India, we act as if we can do whatever we want because this is our own country. But to be honest, it is not our country. We are here to expand our life, and we need to leave some of the things that we do in our own country. We also saw in Ireland recently in 2025 that some gangs attacked Indian men and even children, shouting "Go back to India." And this was actually kind of tied to Ireland's own housing crisis and again the far-right groups spreading misinformation. I think I also recently researched, when I was researching for this video, that in Singapore locals have complained about Indian professionals taking jobs, and on social media you will see Indians being told to go home. So why is this happening in almost every country? What is it that we are not doing right? I just feel like the common pattern is this. Every small negative incident, whether it's a scam, a fight, or a viral video, spreads across borders and damages the image of the whole community. So what's actually true and what's just a stereotype? Let's actually start with the truths, the things we must accept. Visa frauds do happen. We saw this in Canada with the fake college scam. Some Indians do overstay visas. There are caste discriminations that we take abroad with us. And yes, some of us do behave unprofessionally, ignoring the local rules and etiquettes, doing Uber Eats in chappal and constantly talking on phone in your own language. But then there are stereotypes, the ones that are false and unfair. The idea that all Indians are unhygienic or dirty is often based on fake viral stories. The claim that Indians steal jobs doesn't hold up when you actually look at the research. Most of us actually fill skill shortages and actually help the economy grow. The theory that Indians are brought in as a political vote bank is totally baseless because migrants can't even vote until they've lived abroad for years and become a citizen. And the idea that Indians don't integrate is also exaggerated, Most of us do, but the bad examples are the ones that always get highlighted. Now, the danger is when the actions of a few people become the stereotype of millions. Now, let me speak plainly. Yes, racism exists. Yes, some of the criticism we face is unfair, but let's be honest, we don't always help ourselves, do we? Like I just said, we sometimes behave like we're still in India. We talk loudly, we play loud music late at night, we litter and spit in public, we drive recklessly, we show up to work in, like I said, slippers and look unprofessional. We push in queues and don't respect personal space at all. And there are hundreds of other examples. I've personally seen people shoplifting abroad. I've seen videos of people shoplifting. I've seen people doing religious rituals in rivers where it's not even allowed. I've seen people behave casually in jobs where professionalism is expected. And honestly, it makes me feel ashamed. All the time it makes me feel ashamed. Because these small actions might not feel like a big deal to us, but to locals, they leave a lasting negative impression. Honestly, we really need to stop pretending like we are in Delhi or Punjab or in one of the villages when we are actually in Sydney, Melbourne or Toronto. We need to adapt. So, how do we actually fix this? See, the truth is we can't control racism, but we can control how we behave and how we are actually seen. Now, step one, I feel number one is personal accountability. Each one of us needs to respect the law, respect public spaces, and carry ourselves professionally. Intentionally, we have to do all of this. Number two, I feel could be community guidance. Indian student associations and YouTubers, like, this is what I'm trying to do, should play a stronger role in educating the newcomers about local culture, laws, and etiquettes. I feel that social media is also a huge responsibility. Too often silly or offensive content goes viral and ruins the image of the whole community. Think before you actually post something, because once it's out there, it can actually affect millions. Step 4, I feel, is integration. Don't just stick to Indian circles, make friends outside, volunteer, show up in local events, show that, you're a part of this country and don't separate yourself from it. Also, address the internal issues. Caste discrimination, patriarchy, domestic violence. These are problems we sometimes actually carry abroad, and I've seen this. If we don't fix them, they will actually damage us everywhere. And finally, we need to accept that we need to celebrate our contributions humbly. Indian doctors, entrepreneurs, students, teachers, and workers are actually adding so much value to every country we go to. But instead of bragging, we need to show locals how our success actually benefits them too. If we take these steps seriously, I think one by one, slowly but surely, our reputation will fix itself. See, at the end of the day, we are just guests in another country. This is what I feel. If we respect others, we will be respected. But if we don't, then nobody will stand up for us when things actually go wrong. So I think my message to all the upcoming students and young migrants is that come prepared, not just with money or the degree or your dreams, but with the mindset to grow, adapt, and respect. Because that is the only way we can expand our lives and protect the reputation of our community.